we touched upon quite a few topics. I think it's difficult to know, in the room, what everyone's interested in, whether they're interested in the commercial opportunities the drone industry represents. That's my kind of field. My, I suppose, entrepreneurial instincts right now is that the industrial stuff is not a saturated market. I think it's got huge growth, but I just feel that because of the level of complication and the expense, the cost of entry and so on, when you're dealing with professional level drones, the Aztec Falcons, they're very, very expensive bits of equipment. So if they ditch into the North Atlantic, or they end up damaging a high-value industrial asset, there's basically hell to pay. Someone's going to have to pick up the tab. And then you've got right at the bottom of the, I suppose, value chain, what are often regarded as sort of toy drones. These sort of micro drones that buzz around the room. They're quite low tech at the moment. They don't have collision avoidance technologies, but they're not necessarily going to kill someone because they're sort of so lightweight and small, along the lines of what Paul was talking about with the agri drone. So I feel instinctively that sort of indoor, very lightweight, small form factor drones are going to experience a great deal of innovation, and they'll be used for many different applications, for property inspections. I think retail, there's going to be an opportunity for drones to almost act as shopping assistants. So a little plug, I just actually started a web company called Little Flying Robots recently. So flyingrobots.com as just a sort of an experiment to see whether we as a group can start sort of thinking about developing some innovation in that space, because I think that's pretty exciting. So let's touch upon, I guess, so that's business, like I said, business opportunities. There's money to be made here, definitely. We can touch upon, who's technical? Who wants to get into the nitty gritty? Well, not me, because I'm not highly technical. But is there anyone highly technical within the room who's like what I would regard as a hacker, who's interested in writing code and putting components together and building these things? Okay, 3, 4, okay. Excellent. Who are academics, so they're more interested in, I suppose, the more holistic view of the industry and perhaps the implications and some of the moral implications of the technology. Kind of. Okay, we'll touch upon that. So, anyone wants to sort of mention their particular interests? I mean, what do they hope to get out of the meetup? Go for it.
Well, what I would be interested in is actually doing proper gas measurements, but not in the kind of just be an explosive zone level, but measuring in parts per million, so greenhouse gases. So a lot of
environmental, environmental applications.
Yes,
okay.
But in a way, not just that. Let's you do, for example, agricultural stuff, right? You also mentioned SEPA as well. You do now at the moment just basically fly over fields, etc. But for example, over, let's say, landfill sites, they have to comply with law, and that says they cannot emit so and so much methane from their landfill sites. One way of doing that would be to fly over with a drone and measure how much, what is the plume coming off that landfill site. You could use it for loads of different things. The problem is,
and particularly swarms, presumably swarms of drones as onboard sensors.
No, not really. No.
Okay.
The problem here really is, I mentioned that earlier with I think Will.
Yeah.
That you basically go there at a technology where you basically need a drone that is heavy enough, strong enough to actually carry something that could do this measurements. They are not 500 grams anymore, right? We're talking about.
Okay, so you're talking about a heavy-duty sensor.
Exactly.
What kind of form factor, what sort of weight? Because the restriction right now is how much? 55 kilos, or what?
It depends on the category you want.
Okay.
So, sub 7 is one of the key categories. So.
Sub 7 kilograms.
Yeah, which is where we operate. But
okay, that's pretty
you can
restrictive.
have a drone of any weight at all.
Yeah. But what sort of weight are we talking about with a bit of kit?
That's the question. It would probably be about 10 kilos. Because
10 kilos. That's conceivable. I can't see that's the problem. Just flight time is the problem.
It's 25 kilos, and it breaks the back. That's an ultra portable, right?
Sure. But is it fixed wing or rotor?
No, I'm talking at the moment we have a gas analyzer. That's 25 kilos, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, if, for example, the drones become more developed, do you then see also a development of gas analyzers which will fit onto these drones? That's why I said before, you don't have just recombination, you actually have, because something develops, something else will develop to meet these, like the opportunity to work with it.
I guess
that would be very interesting.
Just quickly, anyone who speaks, it'd be really helpful if you could give us your name and basically what you do, just very briefly.
Yeah.
That would be really helpful to put the question into context.
I'm interested basically in gas measurements. It doesn't have to be environmental.
Name?
Anything. And my name is Emmanuel.
Emmanuel.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And you're an academic.
kind of.
And you're interested in using drones for environmental sensing, specifically of gas emissions.
Yeah.
Right. Well.
I mean, I you know, if there's a commercial need and you can make some money out of it, somebody will invent it.
Why not?
So,
why not just do the sampling and analysis separately? That's the first idea that comes to my mind, because analysis, you can take the most heavy equipment and high performance analysis tool you need in the lab, and just take a sampler on the put that on the drone. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Well, we do this in the manned aircraft already.
But the point is, you use a manned aircraft, you're going to be reducing your cost per mission, or sortie, or whatever you want to call it, dramatically by using a drone instead of
size. You would talk about 2-liter bags for each sample. So how big is your drone then?
But I guess you're talking about now. So this is something that often comes up, which is you say, I often, it's not a criticism of you, but I see it quite a lot where people take a trajectory of one technology and then they put another technology next to it, but that technology doesn't have a similar trajectory. So they go, well, how on earth are we going to they did it for dramatic effect in that Channel 4 series about the androids recently, where you had these perfect androids, but everything else was the same, which is a bit odd if you kind of look
Humans,
at it.
Channel 4,
Humans,
right?
that was it, yeah. So that was kind of odd. They did that for dramatic effect, but in the real world, all the technologies will advance together. So the analogy of in that thing Humans, where you get the robot collecting your voicemails off your telephone, well, of course the telephone would have evolved as well. So I think the answer to your question is that I would imagine if there's a requirement and if somebody can make some money out of it, they will develop it, and eventually you'll have whatever the solution is, somebody will come up with it.
I guess on that point, the two things that come to my mind is, first of all, the weight of the sensor and payload itself, which is why I basically follow everyone that does LiDAR, just waiting for that day for it to be small enough, light enough to go onto a fixed wing drone. And the second, of course, is airworthiness. If you're going to just build something that does that, I've been asked that question a lot about environmental sensors, and there's a lot of things you can do with Arduino boards and sensors, put it all together, attach a GPS, get the software together to control a drone. But the next step is ensuring that it's airworthy enough to be operating within these airspaces, because landfill sites often are on the edge of cities. On the edge of cities, still controlled airspace.
But how do we see that? I mean, that's a huge topic, and I know the CEA and particularly the FAA are grappling with it big time. And it's interesting to see, I think, the attitudes of the various airspace regulators. It seems like the FAA are taking a very, I think, rigid and very restricted view compared to, say, the CAA, which is taking a more reasonable view. And there are certain countries, apparently like the Netherlands, that are just, if you want to fly a toy drone in your back garden, you've got to have some kind of permit. I mean, they've almost sort of taken a blanket ban approach. So it's a very hostile regulatory environment. Whereas I think the British government, they see it as being a multi-billion-dollar industry potentially, and therefore really want to see it flourish and nurture. But how do we see airspace? Because we can't have drones roaming around willy-nilly. Clearly, there's going to be some form of disaster, or at best, near collision. So, do we see sort of drone corridors opening up, where the sky is going to be thick with drones just along certain specific designated airspace? I mean, how do we see that?
And I suppose my observation would be that we've not managed to do that with bicycles in the last 100 years. So why would we be able to do that with drones really quickly?
I mean, there already is that segregated airspace for manned aircraft and unmanned aircraft, which is why you shouldn't see a helicopter lower than 500 feet. But if you're ever trying to do a map of Stirling Castle, you realise that's not true. But there's also organisations like NASA who are looking at using things like the Internet of Things as a framework from which all aircraft communicates with each other. They're looking at unmanned, manned aircraft, and of course inner space as well. And I think actually last month we had the first acceptance of an unmanned aircraft into manned aircraft space, a far
Was that
larger size.
BAE Systems?
I'm not sure if they were responsible.
Will, was that sort of
Well,
military, Tyrannus or whatever it's called?
I don't know, but I know,
Okay.
in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, drones, unmanned systems operate next to manned systems all the time. So,
But I mean, we
I guess
theoretically
it's a
have the
UK
technology
civilian problem.
to enable a completely autonomous aircraft. But of course, sociologically, how many people would be willing to be piloted? I mean, it's going to take a long time for autonomous civilian aircraft, but theoretically, we're not that far away from being able to actually enable that from a technological perspective. But it's a sociological barrier that I think very few people would be comfortable being flown on holiday, for example, by a pilotless aircraft.
Although it's very interesting that most modern aircraft take off and land themselves, and the pilot is just there. So
Most
Yeah.
people flying don't even realise.
and I think my joke about it wasn't really, the joke about cycles is if from a futurology perspective, the best way to kind of, I find, to look at what's going to happen in the future is if you look at where we got to now and you come up with some form of an analogous example as to say, okay, well, how do we manage space in general in other places? Well, on the roads we do it like this, in the air we currently do it like that. If we've now got something that's operating kind of in the middle of those two spaces, which from what you guys have said is they're below the kind of the normal CAA and FAA thresholds of interest, but they're not on the ground. So what can you learn? What can you learn from the trends that have happened over the last 150 years that we've been using mechanized transport?
Yeah,
that can inform the next 50.
I think it's like your pikeman analogy, which only goes so far. The pike guy is definitely a little bit remote, but he's actually there, he can smell the blood. Whereas our chief pilot used to sit in Las Vegas and let's go for flew tactical missions to Afghanistan. But you know what he was doing, yeah? It's a completely different psychological impact. Both are heavy, but they're completely different. And I feel the same about the cycling analogy. So with drones, the challenge is sense and avoid. So I can fly a drone in manned airspace, no problem at all. If I can prove I've got the appropriate sense and avoid technology, which could be radar, could be eyes on, could be a combination of that. If I don't have the appropriate sense and avoid technology, which I don't have in cheap drones, then I can't be in manned airspace because I'm not capable of being safe. So that's the debate for me. And it's not like cycles, because with cycles, it's being piloted by a human. You can use and the human's got,
yours.
Careful, the human's got sense and avoid technology. It's ours.
But that doesn't work. But I guess my whole point was that doesn't work, because there are hundreds of people killed every year by cars on bicycles every year. So, and I think this is
it's acceptable. It's
and I think
usually it's human error.
And I think this is the interesting thing for me, because I think the ethical argument, we were just having this conversation, I think the ethical moral argument is flawed in that we already do this. We already allocate decision rights. We already live with risk in all aspects of our life, except often when it comes to computer security, when it comes to unmanned systems, when it comes to autonomy, we accept no risk at all. Where even if the risk is worth having, because the benefit of having that autonomy is actually more safe than a human doing it. So I really struggle with the debate about ethics. The football, and it's not criticism. It's just something I've been thinking about for 2 years. Is that the car versus the football mob. Well, what about if it's a young driver who doesn't know what they're doing? What about if it's a drunk driver? What about if it's a driver who should be wearing glasses and isn't? What about if it's a driver who's distracted by the kid in the back? So
I've thought about the subject quite a bit myself, because it keeps coming up time and time again. And I'm not suggesting this is the solution. I'm just saying this is maybe something that should be considered. What you do is replicate what happens in real life. And that is chance. Sometimes in an accident, something happens that's just simply out of our control, and at that sort of critical moment of truth, it goes one way or the other. Good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people. And if you could almost replicate that into an autonomous vehicle where there's some kind of black box that replicates pure blind chance by running an algorithm so that the car either swerves to the left or the right, in a sense, no one's to blame. You can't blame the manufacturer, you can't blame the person who developed the algorithm. It operates based on blind chance, as long as you make sure that the box is completely untampered with, and the OEM can't sort of tweak it to give the pilot or the vehicle some kind of advantage. But without that element of chance, you cannot, as you say, kind of engineer risk out of everything. It will crash inevitably at some point. Great, we've got some hands, we've got some debate going. I think Trent, you had your hand, but let's keep the conversation going. So I think I've just hit a hot button.
That no sane person would buy a car that had moral agency over their life. If there was a choice that a car, your property was going to kill you in some circumstance.
Well, it will. I mean, inevitably, if there's an accident that's high impact enough, damage is going to be inflicted. That is completely unavoidable. But if you've got an algorithm that's literally choosing, right, do I plow into the crowd of people, or do I intentionally swerve to kill the driver, that is going to open a far greater can of worms than the thing just literally running a pure chance algorithm, and then there's an outcome.
I think I'll stick to my 5-gear manual.
I think people want somewhere to blame though. Yeah. For example, if there is a tragic accident and there's nowhere to blame, not the algorithm or the OEM, people want something to blame, particularly the family members of which have maybe been
involved. And therein lies the challenge, because if there's liability, the manufacturers are going to not make those cars or allow them to be driven, because if there's if there's a compelling argument to say, well, if it crashes, you're going to be to blame, are you willing to take on that responsibility? I'd say 9 times out of 10 they're going to go, no way. So it's a difficult one, and I'm not suggesting that's the answer. I'm just saying I'm putting it out there as a potential solution.
I'd just like to comment. I mean that's, everybody always thinks about the worst case scenario, like crashes and all this. I think AI's got to the point now, you look at Google cars, they're actually getting hauled up in the States for driving too slowly and too safely. It's not going to be about, there will be the occasional crash, a lot less than if you had humans driving them.
That we're all agreed on, absolutely.
A lot more important is things like privacy. So having drones flying over your neighbour's garden,
privacy,
looking at
absolutely
your neighbours sunbathing naked or whatever, I think that's
okay. Well, I've got a solution and answer to that one as well, but I don't want to, kind of monopolise the topic.
I usually throw the Terminator is the best metaphor for that. The Terminator is the only character that sits on both the top 100 bad guy list and the top 100 good guy list, and it's no surprise that it's also the only one out of those 200 that's a robot. Because it really is like a reflection on humanity itself about how we employ these technologies, and I think that's where we should be looking at ensuring there's proper social responsibility embedded within all of that. And no one's more disappointed than a professional drone pilot to see a quadcopter bot in Maplin spying on kids and things like that. And actually, when I was doing the work in Grangemouth, often used parks as a main thing, and you cordon off the area, and the kids run around some of the parks at about 3 o'clock for their sort of PE classes. And one of the kids came up to me and actually asked if I was making a video of them to put on YouTube. That was the first thing that popped into this 10-year-old's mind. And I think that there is that concern that there is a sort of unpolicing right now happening around the world on the use of drones. We are very fortunate in the EU, maybe with the exception of Netherlands, that we sit in a place that has specific aviation law regulations to do with this. The problem is that not many people know those regulations, and that's the kind of steps that need to be hopefully done before Christmas, because everyone's going to get a drone for Christmas. So.
Sure. I think, Trent, you had a question, didn't you? Sorry.
Yeah, I had a question, I had a comment on your discussion on autonomy. The discussion was going to be philosophical.
Sorry, can you just, sorry, I haven't been keeping to the thing, but can you just tell the room who you are and what you do, just to help us?
From Raptor UAS, doing design of platforms.
Raptor UAS. Yeah. So you're an OEM of drones, and you create the platform behind them. Okay.
So despite that the discussions on autonomy, there's actually a framework from the European Commission where deregulation is going to come into the market. That means there are certain dates in 2016 and 2018. There are stepwise, and of course it's always a matter of risk. So before we see, I mean, the military guys, Thales was somebody that I mentioned earlier. It was the first drone fly in.
What was the name of the UAV?
That was the Watchkeeper. I mean, it's a version
Watchkeeper.
of the Watchkeeper, I think.
Okay.
That was the first command to fly drone in the UK within regulated airspace. Now, with the low-level commercial civilian drones, then it's always a matter of risk. So the first time you're going to see a fully autonomous, if you like, with some level of sense and avoid, something like a stereo camera or some optical flow embedded system, then it's going to be in an area outside a city, something like somewhere in the highlands. It's going to be a forest, and people are going to start allowed to, on the basis that they have a sense and avoid technology, to do a degree of autonomy. Now, once the technology has been proven in a low-risk environment, it's going to slowly migrate into a congested environment, something like a city. Now, the fact that Amazon, Facebook, and what have you want to deliver products within cities, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. They had to go with the FAA and they pushed a bit to have a deregulation to allow people to start using drones commercially in the US, but the move from nothing to having certified UAV pilots to go to a full-on
because they have to be aligned with direct line of sight, which is going to be problematic.
Drone deployment within cities, it's going to be a whole different ballgame. And from our point of view, it's unlikely you're going to see drones delivering parcels or games in cities within the next 5 or 7 or maybe even 10 years.
Okay, well, I will get back to you in 5 to 10 years on that one, because I disagree.
I think there's also the interesting point that, why would that be any cheaper for the provider than a bloke with a white van that can...
Well, it won't be. I mean,
so
why would you do it?
Emissions,
why would you do it?
Fewer emissions, far cheaper. There's a very compelling commercial reason to use drones. Gavin?
This is not my area of expertise at all, but I kind of it popped into my head that the very first pilots in the First World War who were up in different planes were spotting, basically, and then somebody said, let's just take a revolver up with us, or then a pistol, or whatever it was. I can see a time, I guess, or I'm wondering if people can see a time when we have to have a drone up there that would be an official drone that would be policing the drones that shouldn't be up there.
Yeah, I would say that's quite... Yeah, there's going to need to be some kind of registration, policing. In my mind, again, it's not a no-brainer. You use public transport in London, for example, and from time to time, fare dodgers are caught out. And the reason is because they have spot checks with inspectors to see if they're carrying a card, or they've got those sort of swipey devices, contactless. And if you're not carrying an oyster with the fare being paid, they can tell on the spot, and there are ramifications. Same with drones. I don't know whether they'll use Bluetooth beacons or some kind of LP WAN, but there will be a way to police drones either wirelessly, or they'll literally drag them out of the sky, and that'll be the equivalent of being pulled over by the police force. And if it's not registered, then the person who's operating that drone will be sanctioned. And I know the FAA are talking about registering drones.
As soon as we have the police drone that's up there policing the drones, we're going to have a serious Big Brother problem at that point.
I disagree. I don't see that it's a problem. In the same way you could say, why should I have a number plate on my car? That's an infringement on my person. I want to be able to drive around the streets or whatever speed I choose and do whatever the hell I like to my car. To prevent me from doing that is an infringement on my human rights. No, we have rules and regulations to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, related to the privacy...
Sorry, could you just give your name and quickly...
Greg, software engineer. The privacy issue somebody touched on just now. I was fascinated by that picture of an insect on somebody's fingertip. Is that a concept mock-up or a real
No,
drone?
it's for real. Stanford University is one of his others.
It can fly around, as I understand it. I don't know a massive amount about
It's
it.
a real
but-
drone.
Yeah.
If they want to pollinate it, because
And they're
obviously
also-
bees are an issue,
Oh, right,
and
China, yeah.
humanity will suffer greatly if if bees are allowed to continue to die off, because we won't be able to pollinate food. Food production will fall off a cliff. This is a fallback option. They're seriously looking. There's a lot of funding available to enable these micro drones to potentially cross-pollinate.
Yeah, I saw a
plant.
documentary about bees recently where in China they're doing hand pollination. They have to buy packets of pollen and do hand pollination with brushes. So, do you happen to know what it's called?
I don't. Do you know, Simon?
I mean, it's being developed. I mean, just Google micro drone, probably MIT lab, and you'll be able to find the person and the YouTube video, and put bees pollination drone for pollination or something like that.
Because the implications of privacy are huge there, and I was wondering if buildings, including houses, are going to have immune systems of their own to stop drones like that getting in.
Well, it's the equivalent of someone walking into your living room. It's completely inappropriate, or jumping over the fence and roaming around your back garden. It's totally unacceptable, but because it's a new technology, people don't understand that's not acceptable.
But with something that small, it's going to be hard to stop.
Well, you could then take the sort of anti-malaria approach that you would, get a battery-powered tennis racket.
But I think there are technologies to
Just
thwart that.
swatted
Yeah, you
away.
have some kind of, again, I'm not technical, but I know that the military are using something similar, where if an uninvited drone enters the airspace of a protected or high security base or asset, you can actually use a signal blocking technology, is that correct? And it'll literally just fall out of the sky the moment it enters the airspace.
This guy's had his hand up for ages.
Go for it.
Thank you. Murray, MBN Solutions, good evening. 3 great talks. My question is as far away from autonomy as possible. It's more on the skills gap side of it. I was particularly interested in what Craig was talking about the advanced training in which the pilots and
because you're looking for people, you're hiring right now.
All the time, yeah.
used to our ears. But also, more importantly, and Paul touched on this as well, it's more, particularly these tier 1 oil and gas companies, which I worked in for a number of years, aren't necessarily interested in what the drone does, but more the information in which they can analyse.
Yeah.
What kind of skills gap are you finding between what is available on the market now and what you need, from a commercial aspect to actually deliver what it is you're trying to do? And how are you getting around it? How are you finding these transferable skills?
Yeah, I mean, skills gap wise, we're doing pretty well generally. We have a big focus on graduates. We're actually in the P&J last week with a couple of pages on our graduate program. So that's really important to us. It's very much a meritocracy approach.
Mm-hmm.
So, with our technology, it's never been done before in the main. So we need guys who are bright, enthusiastic, and have a talented engineering background. So we can find those guys. In oil and gas, unfortunately, with the macroeconomic situation, lots of inspection engineers who are experienced are being let go, so we can find those guys. My big challenge actually is on the software side. So finding somebody with the skill set to build the image analytics engine I've got in my head, that is proving to be challenging. Finding a chief information officer to do what I'm doing, I'm the chief exec, but I'm actually the CIO as well, that is challenging. But the grassroots skills, that's okay, that works.
Chief Innovation Officer or Chief Information Officer?
Yes.
I mean, specifically, okay. Now, are you talking about someone who is looking for new technologies, scoping out new opportunities, new market sectors, or are you talking about someone who's perhaps slightly more technical and
it's a
in terms of
combination
knowledge
of both,
transfer and knowledge management?
Yeah, it's understanding the overall environment, so understand the Internet of Things, understand what's possible with technology, but also be able to deliver for the clients. I mean, Cyberhawk's success is we don't just talk about this, we're actually, everything I've mentioned there, we have clients paying us to deliver this. None of it is vaporware. So, somebody who's got the pragmatic but also the understanding of the technology curve and the evolution.
Because I can imagine as the industrial Internet of Things becomes more and more of a reality, as very high power, robust, accurate sensors are placed on high value assets such as wind turbine blades and the cells, the tower itself, suddenly you've got a situation where the thing becomes almost self-aware, and if there's an impact or a stress fracture or delamination, the sensors will immediately detect it, and maybe even using nanotechnology or self-healing materials, it will be able to actually heal itself, thereby rendering the need for a drone in the first place. So
absolutely,
that's a little bit more futuristic. But if you've got a chief innovation officer, he or she are thinking that way exactly.
Just to add to that as well, there is quite a difference between in terms of video analytics and the imagery analytics as well. And a lot of what we found is that the traditional remote sensing and Earth observation crowd, which could almost be a separate subject in itself from geographic information sciences, is being one of the most powerful assets as well, because you're developing the same types of algorithms using Python, that's geoprocessing. And but again, there's no like one fit solution. For every client, there's a different need, a different feature that they're looking to extract. But never underestimate the fact that you can automate as much as you want. But ground truthing is also important as well.
Is there anything in work with universities specific to unmanned aerial vehicles and the analytics side of it? I know that it's getting very sector specific within financial services, oil and gas. With the boom of which we all know is happening with UAVs, is there any talk going on about very specific courses being applied in Scottish universities or universities globally?
There is new modules now with the Edinburgh University Geoscience Department. That's sort of my old school. They actually now have modules looking at both the building and analysis of this structure from motion, because we're like revisiting something that we kind of put down before and started using lasers, and now we're kind of done a whole full circle and coming back. So they do have specific courses from that. But more importantly, there's a lot of really good support in this country for companies, even small companies like myself, to attach to universities to bring on graduates and interns to join existing projects, so that we can combine both the work that we're doing and helping create those new analytical tools as well for the outputs.
Name?
Aidan Rock, undergraduate math student at Edinburgh University. I just have a question that's a bit technical on the image analytics subject that was brought up. When you say image analytics, do you mean, say, looking at, say, the matrix chart and trying to fill that up using software that looks at images taken by drones and that detects whether or not something is missing, as was demonstrated in the slides?
Yeah, that's the idea, yeah. So either pattern recognition or through computer learning, you want to be able to teach the image analytics software to recognize the defect on that particular asset. So for example, a wind turbine blade, as I mentioned before with a few of the conversations, that's kind of white, grey, and defects very often black. So that works well with pattern recognition and also with teaching. But the example you mentioned there, in terms of that was the missing arcing horn, that's actually very difficult to do because there's a whole bunch of noise in that image. And so that's the challenge of this industry, or certainly my part of the industry. It is to say, okay, let's get this taped on wind turbines, that's great. But then for more complex structures, how do we turn that into an automatic process?
You'd almost need to have a 3D image before it'd even be able to attempt to make sense of it, right? Just a flat.
That's one school of thought, certainly.
Yeah.
But the image analytics guys, they believe that, again, just with a flat 2D image, they can do what they need to do.
It's still possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So, but there's a lot to it. They've got to build some very interesting systems.
I think probably we've got time for one more question. Go for it.
Manuel, again, just on the school shortage, which I wanted to ask before. You had pointed all out that basically it's not the drones or flying the drones which is the actual value aspect. It's actually what to do afterwards with it. However, you're trying to basically tap into a pool which is tapped on by a lot of other people. I guess if companies could have more people who can work with software, who are skilled in mathematics, software engineering, and all these skills. A lot of other more traditional software companies would, expand, and you're basically the important part of the business, which is the innovative part of the business, is trying to tap into the same pool. So do you actually think it can grow significantly, or do you think actually it will hamper you? Because there are only so many people on average, I guess, who are technically minded enough that we will do such a job. So I don't think, even with let's say a big recruitment drive, more teaching at schools, you will not achieve let's say, a very significant expansion of skilled people in the future.
What's your question? Is it more of a comment?
Well, it's a question. Do you see, is it a problem at the moment, or do you see it will be becoming
Again,
a problem?
skill shortage, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I think the answer was yes, right?
Yeah, it's a challenge, but
Yeah.
it's not insurmountable. Yeah, we have number of
Spread,
plans.
spread the word.
Yeah.
So what do you need?
absolutely.
PHP, Python? What are you looking for?
Yeah, PHP definitely. Python, sure, but really it's
Machine learning,
Yeah, absolutely.
image recognition.
I'll take
Collision
any graduate
avoidance.
that does Python or point cloud data formats.
We'll have a competition.
We should
here,
have like a
right?
shopping site.
Absolutely, we should.
What do you offer? Free
Yeah.
gym membership? What other
Absolutely. Get like really cool toys.
Yeah, that's
Free
what I was
food.
going to say.
Industrial
Okay,
assets.
okay,
Sorry,
okay.
pardon me.
Right,
That's
literally
sad.
one more. I've been trying to read your badge, but it's too small. If it was in black, I might be able to read it. What's your name? Sorry.
Me. I'm Ian Robinson.
Ian.
And
Sorry.
I work in the Geosciences Department at the University of Edinburgh. What would you like to measure or look at from a drone that you can't yet do?
Landmine area reduction was a theory I put together for the government of South Sudan because we were making a move from demining to community safety, and agriculture is the overriding development factor for South Sudan at the moment. If you want an orange, you just got it from Ethiopia. But the main thing is that, all right, we'll take the different organizations mapping their stuff in different projections. We sorted that. But the idea is that it's impossible for you to identify a sort of unexploded piece of ordnance because of the various shapes, sizes, and materials it's used. But in theory, you can juxtapose LiDAR and ground-penetrating radar imagery to say for 99.9% certainty that that land is natural. Hence the name landmine area reduction, not landmine area identification. That's a drone that I would be very interested to build because I still have a lot of contacts with South Sudan, and it's still an overriding problem, not just there, but parts of Europe. Yeah, much more places than you would care to believe.
Interesting.
So that would be my.
And a very noble application for
Absolutely,
technology.
great answer. Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll wrap things up there. Thank you very much indeed to. Thank you for coming.